Today I am here to review The Walking Dead Season 4, Episode 16, titled the Season 4 Finale. So let's get started with my review. Now, in this episode, I noticed something. If you really pay attention to the sanctuary, and when you pay attention, when you pay attention of Rick, Michonne, and Daryl and Carl running through the sanctuary, you will notice one part in that scene. You will see two fences, but between those two fences, you will see human bones, human skeletons. You will see human flesh between those two fences or those two gates. You can see how these people, like Garrett and Mary, you can see how these people have peeled the human skin off, and they cooked the skin, but they left the rest of the parts there. You can see the pink meat still hanging on the human bones. That's sick. Also, in this episode, once you see Rick and his group running through the sanctuary, you will notice that you will hear more people screaming. I mean, literally, they have more people they have more people in that sanctuary, in those individual trains or train cargoes. They have individual people stuck in there. They have multiple people stuck in there. You can hear these people screaming when Rick and his group was running through the sanctuary, when those guys were shooting at them from the top of that roof. So there's more people there. I mean, it ain't just Bob, Sasha, Glenn, Maggie, and Abraham them and them. It's more people there. Now, let's talk about Rick right quick. Now, in this episode, you saw a man face his finally face his inter conflict. Finally embrace his inter conflict and his inter conflict in his interfere in his inter brutality. You saw a man finally embrace this and finally come to the terms of what he really is now. Because if you know Rick, you would know Rick was one of those characters who always had brutality in him, but due to his son Carl, he was compressing it, and he wouldn't allow himself to do stuff like this. But in this episode, he showed you what he's willing to do for his son. Point blank, period. He went out for his son in this episode. He shows you, I am not the same Rick anymore. He shows you, I'm a new Rick. And I am a guy who do whatever it takes to survive. And I remember when Shane was talking to Rick, when he had Trick Rick out there to that field. He said this in particular to Rick. He says, Rick, he says, Rick, I'm a better man than you. No, he says, I'm a better father than you, Rick. Rick, I'm a better man than you, Rick. He says, Rick, he says, Rick, I fight for it. I'm here. I'll fight for it. He was talking about Lori and Carl, and we seen what Shane was willing to do to protect them. One reason being, he left Otis there. He left Otis for dead. He used Otis as live bait or human bait for zombies. Just to save Carl. Point two, he was told to not mess with that barn. And Herschel even said that they could stay there. He was told to not mess with that barn, and he went and did it anyway. He did it to benefit the group, but who he really did it for was Lori and Carl. Point three, he was told to leave Randall alone. What he did, he breaks Randall's neck. He did it for two reasons. One reason being to trick Rick out there to the field to kill Rick. But second reason being was to stop Randall from going to his group and they coming back and they come back to the farm and try to take it over or something. So that third reason, he did that for Lori too and Carl, but he also did it, like I say, to set Rick up to kill him too. So Shane showed you what he was willing to do to protect them. And like I say, he told Rick, I'm willing to fight for it. And Rick was the character who always knew what Shane did And some of the stuff what Shane did, Rick agreed with, but only to a certain extent. He didn't like the way Shane went about doing it. He knew killing Randall was Rick knew by killing Randall. Yeah, they would probably have to do that, but still, he didn't do it because he tried to come up with better solutions to it. Shane was a realist. He got it done. And Rick didn't agree with the way he did it. But now, in this episode, as we speak, when Shane told him, I'm willing to fight for him, guess what? Shane, Rick fought for it this time. He fought for it. You seen Rick go all out. He committed pure, sheer brutality in this episode. But here's the difference, though. Shane allowed his rage, his brutality. He allowed that to outweigh his humanity. Shane damn near lost his humanity if Rick would have never killed him. The difference is with Rick did embrace his brutality, his inner brutality, this animal side of him. But Rick is still a human. He's still a man with his humanity. Rick is a person who can balance it out. Same with the governor. The governor had a good point, but he was just like Shane. When the governor was beating up Milton, and he was talking to Milton, and Milton says, "What if your daughter seeing you like this today?" The governor said, he said she'll be frightened of me, but at least she will still be alive. When I heard that, I was like, wow, governor got a good point. But the same with the governor. He allowed his hunger for power. He allowed his revenge. He wanted for Rick. He allowed all of that to outweigh his humanity. And therefore, he lost his humanity. Like I say, Rick is a person who can balance out both. He can have that inner savage brutality in him when he can let that inner savage brutality out of him when it needs letting out. But he can also keep his humanity intact. Now, let's talk about decision making in the Walking Dead series. When you talk about decision making and trust making, that plays a major role in the TV series. Hell, even in the video games, decision making plays a major role because the decision making can either benefit the character or affect the character. And when it comes to Rick and his decision making, Rick felt like I made a lot of bad decisions in my life. But in this episode, he showed you I will never make those decisions again. One, with the governor. Rick felt like if I would have killed the governor in that meeting that we had, I would still have my prison. My daughter would still be alive. Well, he thinks she's dead, but she's alive. My daughter would still be alive. If I would have just watched Andrew die outside when I locked him outside that prison courtyard with those zombies, my wife could possibly still be living. T-Dog would be alive. And also back to the governor with Merle could have been alive. And you can see how decision making is so important because by him not making those decisions that he felt like he should have made, this played a major impact on his characterization and it also his character transformation in his episode. Because you see a man who could have spared this guy who was trying to rape Carl, but he did not allow it this time. He was not gonna let that guy off the hook. Not this time. Also, you can see how decision making affected Daryl. Because when Daryl was talking to Beth, he says, maybe if I would have chose to keep looking for the governor, your father would still be alive. He says we'll still have the prison. You can see how, that's why I say decision making and choice making plays so much of a role in The Walking Dead. And back to decision making, because when you talk about Rick, he just lost the prison. He felt like he lost Judah. And Rick starts to rethink things. he starts to rethink things and all his decisions that he made. He starts to rethink all of that. Also, he starts to think, how do I survive now? How do I do it? Because when he was talking to Michonne, he said something very interesting. He says, all we do is talk about food. He says, I forgot what this feels like. Pretty much referring to he forgot what it feels like to be savaging, to go around scavenging food all the time now. Not now that he don't have the prison, because when he was at the prison, he didn't have to do none of that. And it's do none of that. But now he's out of that prison now. So now now they got to scavenge food again and do all that stuff again. That's the reason why I say he starts to rethink things. And also about the decision making. He started to rethink his decision making after he lost the prison. And also about Carl, because Carl is the only thing he have left. Carl is his will, his hope, determination, his faith, his motivation. He's out of that. And that's the only person he got left. And he came to a conclusion. He came to a conclusion and pretty much said, that's my son's the only person that still have who still keep my humanity intact. And he says, I will never allow my son to get hurt again. I will never put my son in situations when it comes to decision making and about my son. No. Point blank, period. I'm going to do whatever it takes to protect my son. He's the only thing I got left. And you seen in this episode, Shane, you said Rick ain't, you say Rick ain't going to fight for it? Well, guess what? Rick fought for it this episode. And let me say this, if I ain't said this. Yes, Rick have always fought for his family, even after Shane said that. But you have never seen Rick go to a certain extent to fight for his family like that. To commit pure, sure brutality. You never seen that. But you seen in this episode. So Shane, there you go. Also, you have Rick, you have a man, and he's pretty much questioning himself now. He pretty much saying, what is this world telling me? What is it telling me now? And we see it in this episode. And we see how he embraces what he is. And also, in this episode, we get flashbacks with Tyrese, Rick, and the rest of them in Herschel. It was very refreshing to get that. But yeah, we get flashbacks, and we can see how these flashbacks happens 2 months. Well, it happens 2 months later after the Rick versus Governor battle. And you can see how Rick is still kind of looking for him, but also after establishing food. And you can see how Herschel comes to a conclusion and tells Rick that, you know what, Rick, we can build a life here. He says we only been here for 2 months, or 2 months, I think. 2 months or 4 months. He says we can plant a garden, not a garden. We can grow fruit, vegetables out here. We can have a garden out here, Rick. And you can see how Rick kind of annoys him then, but Rick slowly starts to realize where Herschel was coming from. And Herschel even tells Rick to step down from being a leader now, because you don't have to do that anymore. And with that flashback, you see a dad trying to pretty much have his son live a normal childhood, or at least some of the childhood he have left. He's trying to make his son live a normal childhood, because I remember in the flashback, Rick had got Carl some Legos, but Patrick was the one playing with the Legos. And once Rick get into the prison, you can see how he talks to Patrick, and he says, I really got that for Carl. But then he looks at Carl, and you can see how Carl, he's grown so much until he's used to constantly defending himself now, and he's past that child stuff. You can see how he's cleaning out his pistol, and you can see how Rick says there's no need for this no more. And Rick takes his gun off, his gun holsters, and he throws it on the table, and he takes Carl's gun and put it on the table. He says, come out here. And he teaches Carl how to farm, because Rick becomes a farmer. That's how the council got created. We get a flashback of that. Now, with the opening scene, we see Rick with a snare. We see him catch a rabbit, and we also see 2 guys getting eaten alive by zombies. Now, Carl tries to save one, but to them is no luck. But also, we see a vehicle. We see Michonne and Carl, well, Michonne and Rick sitting by a vehicle that night. That same vehicle that we saw that day, and we also saw that zombie body. Well, it was on the side of the road. Well, the two guys that we saw getting eaten alive, that was their vehicle that was pulled on the side of that road, because we could tell they had hit the zombie, because we can see the little cracks in their windows. We can also see the grill point. Well, the grill part of the vehicle is completely destroyed, tore off. And we can see that zombie that they hit was on the side of that road. And we can see half of the zombie body is pretty much look like it's smashed in and stuff. It looked very nasty. Michonne kills it. Now, with the scene that night with Michonne, Carl, and Rick, Joe and his group, he ends up finding Rick. He puts a gun, he put his pistol to Rick's head, and pretty much he won't pay back for Rick for when Rick had killed Lou, and he pretty much wants payback. And we can see how Daryl tries to step in, and he says that these people are good people. And remember, Joe have a rule: no lying. Anything you claim is yours, and we don't tolerate no lying. And Joe thought that Daryl was lying because of the fact that if Rick was a good person, he would have never strangled Lou and killed him in that house. And uh Joe pretty much tells them Daryl was lying. And he also says go all the way. Pretty much when he says go all the way, pretty much saying kill him, just like they did they other group member. And we can see how Rick, he goes into a furious rage when he sees Carl getting attacked. And that's the reason why I'm saying at this point, Carl is the only thing that matters to Rick at this point. He's the only thing that's keeping his humanity intact. You can see how Rick goes into a furious rage, and he literally backheads butts Joe in the face, and then he ends up biting a big chunk of flesh out of Joe's neck, and you can see how Joe starts to die because he can't breathe. And you can see how the guy who is trying to rape Carl, Rick says, he's mine. He walks up to the guy, he stabs the guy in the stomach, but this ain't your ordinary stab. I mean, he was going up the guy's skin with the knife. I mean, like gutting him, like literally gutting him, like it looked terrible. Then once he stabs him, once he guts him open, he takes the knife out and continues stabbing him. And like I say, with that scene, that next morning we see Daryl and Rick talking. And I like what Rick said when he was talking to Daryl. He asks Daryl how he met them, and Daryl says he says he liked them, or he gave them a chance because they had a moral code, they had code, and a lot of people don't live by codes these days, especially in that world. And Rick tells him it's not your fault, because Daryl felt like it was his fault because he was with them and stuff. And Rick says, you being here with us, that's everything. He says, you my brother, pretty much telling Daryl that you're my brother. I trust you with my life. I trust you with my son's life. And you can see how Daryl kind of gets quiet when he says that. And he almost, man, I love that scene. And Daryl tells Rick, he say, hey, what you did last night, anyone would have done that. And Rick says, no, not that. Well, not in that way. And then Daryl says, something happened that ain't true. And then Rick says, Daryl, you saw what I did to Tyrese? He says, that's not Al. He says, but that's me. That's who I am. He says, that's me. That's why I'm here. He says, that's why Carl was here. I'm going to keep him safe. That's all that matters. And when he says that, the way he talked to Daryl, in the way he was able to talk to Daryl and show signs of him still being human, it shows you that Rick know what he did, but now he's embracing his inner brutality, because he know he have to resort to that sometimes to survive. And he shows you in that scene that yes, I still have my humanity. in my brutality at the same time. I haven't lost my humanity. I know what I did, and I'm embracing what I did. So yeah. Now, with the final scenes, we see Rick and we see Carl and we see Daryl. They in the final sanctuary. Now, once they find that, we see how Rick takes his revolver and he puts it in the bag and he buries it. When he buries it, now that right there shows you that the gun have very good symbolism to him, because once he buries that gun, pretty much saying that I'm not that same guy, because he could have used that gun. Think about it. He's going in the unknown territory. Why come he didn't bring the gun? Because like I say, he have Joe gun. Joe gun had 2 clips to it, and also I know his revolver only holds 6 bullets. But still, when you're going into a unknown territory, ain't no telling what's gonna happen. So why not bring a gun? Why not bring an extra gun? You can notice that he put the gun in the bag with the arrows and he buries it. He says, I'm going to be back for it. And I was like, yeah, that gun has some symbolism to it. I know that's his favorite gun, but you would expect him to bring it with him, especially when you're going into that type of territory you don't know about. Now, with the final scene, we see Michonne and Carl talking, and Michonne say how she felt like she was a monster, and she also tells Carl about some more about her son Andre, and she reveals that the camp had got overrun by zombies. But she also said before that, prior to that, that she says that some of the members at the camp was either running away, leaving, or some of them just gave up hope. And she brings up Mike and Terry's name. It's revealed with that conversation that she had that Mike and Terry was getting high because that was the only way they could cope with things. So they got high and they gave up. And she said one time once she got back to the camp, she says she noticed the camp has been overrun. And she said once she get there, she realized that Tony and Mike has got bitten by a zombie, but they're just sitting there high. And by them being high, they didn't. But by Mike being high, he didn't protect his son. That's why his son got killed. It makes sense now. And she pretty much says that she was angry at him because she says I cut off their mouth and I cut off their arms. And she says I felt like a monster. Because she said she used to use them and stuff to so other zombies wouldn't mess with. She said I felt like a monster by doing that. And she says, but until I met Andrea, I met Rick, and I met you, and it allowed Michonne as a character to open up. So yeah, with that, and Carl tells Carol that he feels like he's a monster because he says I tried so hard to do what my father told me to do about my childhood, and he says I just can't do it because when he seen Rick stabbing that guy, he was just looking at it and he was kind of enjoying it because, like I say, Carl has that brutality in him too, but Carl can't cope with it though, so he calls himself a monster. So yeah, and it's also is noticed. This also is noticed by Carl when one of Gary guys were checking him out, and one of Gary guys asked Carl, "Did he deserve it?" And Carl says back, he deserved it." He just said it like he deserved it. He didn't show no signs of pity. He didn't show no signs of nothing. He said he deserved it. Point blank. Period. Now with the final scene, we see Rick stick up one of the guys because they find Herschel's watching stuff, and they pretty much take off running. You can see how the guys on the roof was shooting at Rick, but he wasn't really trying to kill him because I think they were trying to cut off the corners and stuff and try to draw them into the open. Because if they wanted to shoot at him and kill him, I think they could have, and they draw them into the open and force them to get into a part of a train or a cargo of a train. And with that ending, we see everybody in the cargo, and at the end, Rick says they're screwing with the wrong people. So yeah, this right here was my review for The Walking Dead Season 4. Hope you guys enjoyed it. So have a nice day. God bless you. Subscribe, rate, comment. Peace.